It's been almost a full year since the last episode of season 3. I feel almost ashamed to say that. I meant to take a 6-month break, but it turned into a year. But like I said on the intro podcast last week, it really has been really busy. Just after season 3 ended, so that was the end of February, I finished up working on a project that was really inspiring and life-changing for me in a way. But you'll hear more about that in a couple weeks. I'm going to do a podcast on the project and the outcomes and what it meant. The project is called One Vision, One Voice, and it was looking at the overrepresentation of Black kids in the child welfare system. So we're going to talk about that. But right now, we're talking about why I was gone for a year. But I guess, so after that project, I took about 3 months off just to be present, to be home, to be a mom. So I did all that, and it was lovely. And it also coincided with some activism work that I was doing in my kids' school board, and then aligned with some work that other moms were doing, Black moms. And we kind of came together, and all the stars, it was very fortuitous, I guess is the word. And all of the stars kind of aligned, and we formed a group called Parents of Black Children. And it's an advocacy group that looks at the state of education for our Black kids, right? And what they're facing in the education system. And the group's really taken off and become a bit of a force and requires more attention than I thought. And it's continual attention for all of us that, we put in a lot of time. So I think that's really taken a lot of my energy. And I also started a new job that is interesting and it's exhausting mentally and just it's demanding. So that's also been occupying my energies. There's a lot going on. So I took my own advice. I think last season, I did a show on Black women and mental health. And I really kind of took that to heart, and I took my own advice, and I did what I could manage, and I took what I could deal with. And at the time, so for the past year, the podcast, I just couldn't, I guess, deal with it. And it's also really hard to, I go to work now, and we focus on equity and race, and me in particular, because it's part of the way I work. So I'm thinking about race there and what it means to be Black and legacy and all those things. And then I come home, and then there's this activism work that's happening with this Black parents group, and I'm thinking about, Black kids in the education system and my own kids and Black, and it's hard. And then I guess the last thing I want to do is be on social and talking about all these issues again. So it's been, I just wasn't able to do it, but I'm feeling I'm in a better place now. I feel stronger and more able to re-engage in the podcast and the world of, blogging while Black. So I'm back. We're back. And this week on the show, I'm speaking to Nefertiti Austin, and she's the author of Motherhood So White. It's a memoir of race, gender, and parenting in America. And I interviewed Nefertiti back in July, and I have to apologize to her. She was so gracious with her time, and I'm really sorry it took so long to put this together, but I better late than never. So here we are. So Nefertiti's book it's about Black motherhood. It's really the book that I've been waiting for, that I've been looking for. And she talks about her journey to motherhood. She talks about the process of adopting her children and what it means to adopt as a Black single woman. Her story is inspiring. Her writing is insightful. If you're looking for an informative read about Black parenting or Black motherhood, get this book. You can find the book on Amazon, and I will provide a link in the show notes. But for now, here is part 1 of our discussion, and be sure to stay tuned at the end for a preview of part 2 of our conversation.
Tell us a little bit about your journey to motherhood. And actually, firstly, tell me why you decided to even write the book. what made you, pick up a pen, sit at your laptop or computer, and start writing about motherhood from the perspective of a Black woman?
The biggest reason was, just as you said, that my book is something that you had been looking for. It was something I was looking for. And when I finally was ready to settle down and become a mom, I love to read. I like information, and I was looking for stuff. And that was probably right at the beginning of all those Mommy Wars books. And I thought, okay, that sounds cool. Surely there is something for me. And I was just shocked and annoyed and angry that everywhere I went, I couldn't find a contemporary book about Black motherhood. There were certainly things that had been written in the 80s. And I mean, the mother of us all, Sojourner Truth, with Ain't I a Woman? So Black women have been having the conversation about motherhood, Black motherhood, for hundreds of years. And so now it's my turn, and there was nothing for me. So that was really the impetus of my early writings about motherhood. And I don't even think when I started in '09, I even realized I was writing about motherhood. I was really kind of complaining about the fact that I couldn't find narratives that reflected my experience, not only as a mother, but as a Black mother.
Yeah. I think our journey to motherhood was different, but our experience like is so similar. And I think for me, like I also gravitated to writing to just unpack what I was
Yes.
experiencing as a Black mother. And
Sure.
for me, often it's like therapy, right? Like just trying to figure out what is going on here. You begin this book talking about Trayvon Martin, and I thought that that was really significant because for so many of us, that was like an awakening.
Yes.
And I know for me, that year in particular, and then it was like it's like a cutoff point, right? There was like before,
Sure.
prior, and then after. And
Yes.
I mean, after it literally was an awakening, and you start to your eyes are just wide open,
Yes.
right? And so I guess, can you talk a little bit about that experience and why you chose to enter the journey of motherhood in your book through the Trayvon Martin story?
I thought it was a pretty good place to start because that marked the first time I understood that my experience as a mother really was significantly different from my white mom counterparts. And I was very specific and deliberate. I wanted a little boy. I wanted a Black boy. And I was so happy. It's like I got everything I could possibly want in a child. And we're going along and things are going great. So I thought. And then when Trayvon Martin was murdered, it was like a wall just sort of shattered in front of me. It was like, oh, so my role as my son's mother, in addition to just protecting him from regular things, is to really be all over his safety and figure out a way to talk about it, let white moms in particular know that we live in constant awareness of there are so many things that can go wrong when my son goes outside to play. And the simple act of putting that hoodie on my son that night, again, didn't think anything of it until we were standing on the street corner and really having a moment of like, wow, this simple act of pulling his hood up really changes who he is to some people. And so I really wanted to humanize how it feels as a Black mother, as a mother of a child of color, as a mother of a Black boy, and who this child, this innocent child, represents. And regardless of the circumstances between Trayvon and the other dude, he was somebody's child. Someone loved him. People loved him, and he is missed. And his death was just so significant to me that I felt like this would be a great place to really kind of ground my story and talking about race and gender and motherhood.
Yeah, and I think for so many of us Black women who have, and men who have kids, and who had kids around that time, it was just this heightened sense of fear, like just fear. And I remember that so specifically. And it was also like around the time of an awakening for my own son in terms of race, and we're trying to deal with that. And I remember searching for a mom's group, and I came across a Black moms group. And it's funny because when I was speaking to that mom who started that group, she said that around that time there was like a spike in Black mothers joining the group. And I think it was just for all of us, there's like a generation of us where it's like you kind of just, it is really this like awakening and this gravitating towards each other for support, because there's no one else that really understands what we're going through, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
And you talk about the physical safety of your son, but for Black kids, can you talk a little bit? I got cornered by a principal at a school board, and she said to me, she's like, I don't understand, when something's wrong in a school, why do Black parents turn to the community? She's like, I don't understand. And so I was trying to explain to her, right, like why, like this is important. So I know you were laughing, but for people who are not, who are not familiar with the experience of living in a Black body, what else? So that it's that physical safety, but for Black kids, can you talk a little bit more about the emotional safety? What happens when they leave and they're going to school? What happens in every space, and what that's like as a Black mom?
Sure. Well, the physical certainly is important. And like you say, the emotional safety is, in some respects, almost even more important, just because they have to be able to navigate their way when we're not there, to run interference for microaggressions or someone potentially following our kids around the store. I know for me, we have a village at the school, a group of moms, and we really support each other, and we look out for the kids, and we are all over their interactions, not just at school, but certainly in the world as well, so that the kids don't get scarred early on and then they check out emotionally, be it academically, or maybe they shut down emotionally. So then we can't support them in the way that they need to be supported. So the community is key, because we can have a shorthand conversation about what happened instead of having to go step by step by step. This happened. This is why it's important. That happened. This is why he was upset. This is why I was upset. We can get to the bottom line and then be able to figure out, how do I talk to my child about what he or she has just experienced? And sometimes we have to rip the Band-Aid off and tell our kids when they're young, just to preserve their emotional, I guess, sanity, for lack of a better word, just to preserve that piece of them, that there will be spaces where people are going to not necessarily be excited to see you. And that's okay, because you belong and you have every right to be here, and I will support you every step of the way. And it's just so that they have that confidence just to keep going forward, because if the kids check out early, it's so hard to get them back in, because then they're dealing with fear and low self-esteem and just a whole bunch of issues that we've already struggled with in our community. And it's about the ability to break that cycle by keeping them emotionally safe.
Yeah, you put that so beautifully. And I read a study that said that Black boys in particular, that they do check out and disengage from school around 8 and 9, like as early as 8
Yes.
years old. Yeah.
Yes. I've been looking for Kawanza Kunjufo's book. I think it's called The Destruction of Black Boys, something like that. It came out, I want to say, in the 90s, and he's written a couple of books about third grade is typically where we lose the boys. And
Yeah.
I've been trying to, I had a copy of it. I must have shared it, and I've been looking for it. But it's not just the boys. The girls check out too. But definitely, I know the boys will check out.
How did you combat that with your son?
I think because I had read that book so long ago that as he approached third grade, it was on my mind. And so I made a point to really make sure he remained engaged. And when I had to go in for parent teacher conferences or talk to the baseball coach because maybe he wasn't as engaged as he should be, I made a point to really listen to what they were saying and try my best to kind of filter through, okay, this person is telling me he's not being engaged, and this is a Black man telling him this who's had this experience because he was an 8-year-old Black boy before. This person is giving me feedback, and this is coming from a white man who is very invested in my child's learning, and he likes him and all of these wonderful things. But let me make sure that he understands that this is a crucial age for him. And I just kind of kept checking in with the teachers. I kept checking in with my son just to see where his engagement level was. And if I felt like, he's kind of checked out or not as enthusiastic about learning the way he has been, just kind of sitting with him and maybe finding things to his interest to try to keep the enthusiasm level up. So I'm sure I overdid it. I'm sure.
No, I don't think you can.
So, but yeah, just really 3rd through 4th grade, really paying close attention to him and seeing where he was.
So I want to talk about your journey to motherhood.
Okay.
Because you adopted your children.
Yes.
Can you talk about, so in the book you talk about like your family history, and you talk about your own relationship with your parents. And you kind of break it down and then lead into your own journey to adoption and what that meant for you, for your relationship with your parents. And then also, I guess not barriers, but just the presumptions that people within the Black community make around like adoption, right?
Yes.
But I wanted to say something. So one of the things I thought was hilarious in here was you said, my parents got a Black divorce, which meant they physically and emotionally went on their respective lives, but neither legally filed for divorce. And I thought, oh my God, I know people like that. I never thought about it as a Black divorce, but it's true.
Yes.
So I thought that was like, I love that. I thought, okay, that's actually putting a name to something I've seen for a long time and you just don't think about it like that. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Black divorce, Black adoption. We do things our way. Yes.
Yeah, we do. So tell me about that way. So tell me about what it was like for you on this journey of adoption.
So I definitely always wanted to be married and have a family. I was raised by grandparents who were very traditional, so that was definitely modeled for me. And the problem, though, was as traditional as they were, my thinking isn't super traditional. And so somewhere in my mind, I felt that it was okay. Like people made family how they made family. And so my best friend is adopted. So I had seen that up close. And as I got older, I made other friends with people who were adopted, and they seemed to be okay. So I think that had always been in the background of this is a way that I can achieve motherhood. And so I wasn't super pressed about being pregnant. I did have girlfriends who really wanted to be pregnant. And again, I thought all that was cool and would look through magazines and all that fun stuff. But I never felt like that's the only way to become a mother. So I finally, I think it must have been around 36, 37, was ready. I really was like, I really want to be a mother. And I wasn't seeing anybody seriously at the time. Certainly wasn't going to wait for a man to validate that for me. And decided that I wanted to adopt. And I knew enough to kind of keep that to myself with regard to my very traditional family. And so I shared with friends and like my cousins and stuff. But my friends were great. I had some who laughed because they were like, you're going to be someone's mom. Yes, me, why not? And what was interesting was two things happened. Once I started the process, where a number of people kind of came out of the woodwork and said, wow, that's something I always wanted to do. And then the other group were, okay, so when you get your baby, what are you going to do? What is it going to look like? Really wanting to have all of the answers up front. And that's just not how things work. So I think I'm enough of a risk taker that I was open to however this is going to work out. I believed it was going to work out. So when I ran into the naysayers, I was able to weather most of the criticism. A couple of comments hurt my feelings, but ultimately I was clear that I was ready to be a mother. So I could block out the other noise. But in our community, it's fascinating. I've had every comment from, wow, that's so wonderful, to the biggest question always is, do you know the people? Do you know their people? Do you know their mom? Are you friends with their people? And the shock of, no, I have a name. No, I've never met the mom. No, I don't know this, has been very interesting, just given our history and how we take care of each other and how Black people commune with one another. So that continues to be very surprising that that's typically the first question. Do you know them?
What do you think that is? So, I mean, for us, for Black people who have a heritage that descends from the transatlantic slave trade, that's part of our DNA is caring for each other and caring for children that do not belong to us.
Right.
Caring for, like, we're aunties and uncles, and we kind of,
Yes.
grandparents looking after kids, and
Yes.
and it's not. And my parents are from the Caribbean, and that's very common. It's like this kid's going, living across the street with so and so, and no one questions it, and it's just how it is. But it's not formalized. Do you think that is it the formalization of that causes such angst, and it's almost like suspicion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think so. I think it is the formalization of it. And then also Black people are very protective of our mothers, even when mom is out there and not doing what she's supposed to do. We get really protective and we feel some kind of way if you talk bad about someone's mom. And I think the formal process announces to everybody that child's mother was, fill in the blank. And I think that has a lot to do with it. And we like a point of reference. So sure, you could take in the child across the street because you know their mom, you probably know their grandma, you've seen their cousins, their uncles, that sort of thing. You have a sense of who their family is. You have a sense of what you're getting. And so when we adopt children, we don't know whose family, whose people, we don't know. That big mystery is very scary for some people, which is, again, weird because, like you said, I mean, all this stuff started in Africa.
Stay tuned for part 2 of my conversation with Nefertiti Osman next week.
As Black moms, I mean, we're not a monolith. This is just my experience. I mean, there are varieties of Black mom experiences, but I really wanted to say, hey, there's some of us over here, and this is what we think, and this is how we live, and this is how we parent, and this is how we love, and this is how we deal with things that are against us.
If you enjoy listening to the show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you get automatic updates of new episodes every Tuesday. Also, leave a review and let other people know what you think of the show. Don't forget to follow Woke Mommy Chatter at Woke Mommy on Twitter, on Instagram, and follow along on Facebook at Woke Mommy Chatter. Be sure to visit the Woke Mommy Chatter website at www.wokemommychatter.com to help support the production of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to Woke Mommy Chatter.